Hey guys, my name's Aaron from Geek Lemmy Development and welcome to our Objective-C tutorials. In this tutorial we're going to be learning about NSTimers. Now NSTimers give us the ability to trigger and repeat a certain action. Now we're going to be using these to create a stopwatch where we press a button, then it starts counting, and at any given time we can stop the counter and reset it and start again. We'll also take it a step further to create a countdown, where we'll be giving our users a certain amount of time, and once their time is up, we can then trigger our action and say game is over. So let's jump straight into the lecture. So to set up and create our NSTimers, I have my project already set up. It's a simple single view application for the iPhone and I've named it NSTimers for the purpose of this tutorial. Now, before we get onto it and create our NSTimers and get them to perform actions and stuff like that, I'm first going to jump into my main.storyboard. Because from here, we're going to set up the interface to allow us to test the NSTimer to make sure it's working. So the first thing I'm going to do is get our view here, select the files owner, and change it from the inferred size here to a larger iPhone screen size. And then I'm going to add in a few objects. So how we're going to test the NSTimer first and get it to work is by simply having a start button. We're going to press the start button and then it's going to set our NSTimer to start counting upwards of 1 every time over however long we want it. So we can get it to count 1 every second like a normal timer, or we can get it to count 1 every 10th of a second, and that will go up really fast, however way you want to basically set it up. And then we're also going to have a stop button. This stop button is simply going to stop the timer and then get it ready for us to reset it and start all over again. So to do this, we're going to need 2 buttons within our app. So again, the first one is going to be our start button. So I'll name it our start button. The second one, if I just copy and paste it here, is going to be our stop button. And finally, to display the timer, we're going to need a label. So we're going to throw a label in there. Now space it out, I'll make it a little bit bigger, center the text and increase the text size so it stands out, it looks a lot better on the screen. And then we're going to bring up the assistant editor. Now make sure the assistant editor is selected within our viewcontroller.h, as this is an Objective-C tutorial, so we need to add our actions and outlets within the .h file. So the first thing I'm going to do then is select my start button. I'm going to space out the section here. Start button. Control click or right click and drag it over and drop it in, and make sure this is an action. Now simply name this start counter and add that in. Do the same for our stop button. Now name this stop counter as well, making sure again that is also an action. And then finally we're going to add in our label. Now we can do it in 2 ways. We can add it straight in as a property, or we can leave it normal and add in as a property. So we can drag and drop it over. Outlet. Simply name it label and add that in. Okay, so we've got all the actions and outlets linked up to all of our objects. We're now going to close our assistant editor. We're now going to jump into our viewcontroller.h, where you can see all of our objects are now placed from within it. So the first thing we're going to do now is create our NSTimer and our int to allow us to create our NSTimer, to allow it to work and display the value of it from within the int. So after our UI view controller here, we'll do our parentheses brackets and press enter. And we're going to first start with our NSTimer, so do NSTimer, and that's simply going to be named our timer, and that with a semicolon. And then we're going to create our int, and this is going to be named our count int, and that with a semicolon. So we've created them both, and we can now reference them from within our app. So now we've done that in our .h, we can now jump into our viewcontroller.m, where we can now code it to get it to basically perform what we want. Okay. So again, how this is going to work is based off our start counter button. When we press it, it's then going to trigger our counter to start counting up, and it's going to display it within our label. So I'm going to space out our start count button here, and the first thing we're going to do is set our counter to 0. So we basically can get our int, which is going to hold the value of the number, and set it to 0. So we get our count int, and that's going to equal 0. Let me end that with a semicolon. We're then going to get our label to then display what's being placed in our int. So we do self.label.text, as we want to display it within the text, to equal bracket our NSString space string with format, Then we do our @ symbol, 2 quotation marks, and that with a comma, because we need to add in our count int, and have a bracket and a semicolon. Now, if we're in the 2 quotation marks, we need to place this count int within it, to place it within the string. And how we do that is with our %sign and the letter I. And this converts it into the string to display it within our label's text. So all that's basically done so far is set the counter to 0, or our int to 0, and then displayed it within our label, which is going to display the number 0. Now we need to trigger it to start our timer, our NS timer, to start counting up. We're going to set it to do 1 every second, like a stopwatch. So we get our timer, and we get it to equal our bracket, our NS timer. Then we do schedule timer with time interval, and we need the one with the selector at the bottom there. And in the first highlighted section, we're going to add in how often it's going to update itself. So we want it to do it every second, so we do 1.0. So you can change it how you want. If you want it to do it a lot quicker, you just reduce the value. If you need to go longer, increase the value. The target, we're going to do self. The selector, we do @selector. And in the highlighted section, we're going to come back to that in just a moment. The user info, we do nil, and repeat, we're obviously going to select yes, as you want it to keep repeating, and we end that with a semicolon. Now, the reason we leave our selector blank is because that's going to trigger a void statement. So whatever's in the void statement is going to get triggered every second. And what we're going to place within this void statement is to add 1 every time onto our int. So this is the NS timer we're working with. So I'll space out this section here. We're going to add in our void statement. So we do dash bracket void. And this is going to be our count. We'll just call it our counter. There we go. And that with a bracket, well, parentheses brackets just there. So from within the selector, we now give the name of our void statement, which is counter. There we go. So that's all linked up. So again, when it gets triggered, every second that we set it to, it's going to trigger this counter, this void statement, to perform every second. And within this, what it's going to do is get our count int to plus equals 1 every time it gets called upon. Now, because it's getting called upon every second, it's going to add 1 to our counter every second. And every time it does that, we then want it to then display what the current value of that int is within our label. So we get our self.label, just like we've done before up above when we set our count int to 0, to equal, we need to make sure I've capitalized that L there, dot text to equal our bracket, our NS string with format, our @ symbol, 2 quotation marks, within it, our %sign, the letter I, after that, quotation mark there, comma, and our name of it, count int, and that of a semicolon. So we're going to build and run now and test it out to see exactly how this works. So we build and run, and we just wait for it to load up now. Okay, so once it loads up, our start button doesn't do anything at the moment. It's our start button that we can look at. So once we press it, it's going to trigger our count int to equal 0. Once that's equal 0, it's going to display it within our label. And then that's going to trigger our NS timer. And we've set our NS timer to kind of repeat itself as many times as infinite until we stop it every second. And every time it does that, it's going to trigger our counter void statement. And every time this gets triggered every second, it's going to plus 1 to our counter, then display the new value of our int, because it's adding 1 onto the int every time, and display that within our label. So we press start, you see it's 0, and every second, triggering that void statement and adding 1 to the int or to our counter, and then displaying again itself within our label. And that's going to keep going up and up and up. We haven't chose to stop it yet. There's no way of stopping it, as we haven't coded our start button to do anything. So there we go. We know it's working, we know it's displaying correctly, and we know it's going up. What I'm going to do now is get our stop button here with a space out so you can clearly see. And what this is going to do is simply stop our NS timer from continuing. And how we do this is do bracket, the name of our timer, which is timer, and all we're going to do is invalidate it. And I have a bracket and a semicolon. This completely stops the timer from repeating in its tracks, and it won't go any further or won't trigger the void statement anymore. So again, we can go to build and run and test it out. So we can start it, it will trigger it, start going up, and at any time we're ready, we can just simply press stop, and it completely stops the timer and it invalidates it, and it won't repeat itself anymore. So we stopped on number 5. And because we start our start counter to simply, when we press it, go back to 0, we can press it and it restarts, and at any time we can stop it and restart it again. So we've got it working. We've got it doing what we want it to do. It simply starts counting up. If you wanted it to take away, you can simply change the plus here to a minus. And if I go to build and run, and this will then take away. So if we press this now, you see it start going -1, -2, -3, -4, and simply press stop. And we can reset it. And again, it goes down again. So it's great, we know it's working. We're now going to take it a little bit step further. We're going to mess around with it now. So the first thing we want to mess around with is giving it the ability to, once it let's say we create a countdown, we want to start at 10, and when it gets to 0, we want to invalidate the whole timer itself. So what we're going to do then is get the counter here and equal it to 10. It's always going to start at 10. Every second it's going to take away 1, and once it gets to 0, we want it to invalidate itself. So basically we're going to get rid of the stop counter here. And what we're going to do is if, and the conditions here are count int equal 0, what it's going to do is get our bracket timer to invalidate, just like it does within the stop button, and that with a semicolon. So this is just simply eliminating our stop button altogether. So again, if we go to build and run, this is if you want to create your very own countdown. So if we press start, it starts at 10 because we set it to within our start button, and you'll see now once it reaches 0, because the count int equals 0, it's then going to invalidate our timer. And once it reaches 0, it won't go any further. So that's how you basically use them to create countdowns, such as in games and whatnot. Now when it reaches 0, we can get it to perform a function. So as well as invalidating the timer itself, we're going to get it to display text within another label. So what we're going to do is jump into our main.storyboard, and we're going to drag and drop it in this label. Again, we'll space it out. There we go. We're going to bring up the assistant editor, make sure we're on our view controller.h, drag and drop this in, and make this one, we'll simply call it label 2, and connect that up. Okay, so now we've done that, jump back into our view controller.m. So as well as invalidating the timer, we can get it to perform things. So let's say you were in a game and you had 10 seconds to do something. When it gets to 0, it's going to invalidate the timer, it will stop the game, and you've either won or you've lost. Let's say if the timer gets to 0 and we complete an object, you lose. So what we could do is self.label2.text to simply equal, alright, symbol, 2 quotation marks, you lose. Let me end that with a semicolon. So if you go to build and run again, and let's say press start, we're playing the game, we're having fun, but we don't quite finish the objective before the timer runs out, and once it runs out, it then displays you lose within the label. Now again, we could reset this, and as it counts down, obviously we can't change it, we haven't changed anything like that, but we can press stop and it will invalidate the timer itself anyway, so that could be how we complete the game. And if we did that, we could then set up our own little label to kind of read you win if you do complete the game. But there we go, that's how we can create countdowns using our NSTimers, how we use NSTimers to not only count up, but basically how we can invalidate them and stop them from going any further. Also, we've got it to work, create our own countdown timer from 10 to 0, and how it can simply invalidate its own self when it reaches a certain value, such as reaching 0, and how you can perform actions depending on what it reaches. Another way you could do it, rather than letting it equal 0, you can also make it equal a different number. For example, if I copied this, and let's say we set it to 5, and again, say you're using your game, we can simply have this time is almost up. So if you're creating a game and you've only got a few valuable seconds left, you can give your user a quick little message within the game saying basically hurry up because the time is going to run out. So it doesn't always have to equal 0. And obviously we're going to get rid of the invalidate timer because we don't want it to stop when it reaches 5. So if you build and run this time, when it builds up. So you get it, when it reaches 5, you'll get the message simply saying when it comes up now, time is almost up, and once you reach 0, you lose. There we go, nice and simple. So that's simply how you can use NSTimers within your applications to create countdowns, even get to trigger actions depending on what value it's currently on, and how we can simply stop them, all within the Objective-C language. Hey guys, just before you go, I'd like to thank you for watching this tutorial, and if you did enjoy it, make sure you click that big like button down below. And if you'd like to further your knowledge and progress within iOS 9, Xcode 7 for Swift 2 and Objective-C, where you can learn how to create 20 real life applications, links for these will be below in the description of the video. And if you'd like to learn iOS development on the go, then make sure you check out one of our many iOS applications where you can learn how to create applications again within Objective-C and Swift. The links for these will also be in the description down below. And I'd just like to say one last time, if you did enjoy this video and it did help you out in any way, make sure you hit the big like button down below on the video, and make sure you check out our website geeklemon.com, where you can find the full source code for this tutorial and all the others we offer. And make sure you like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter so you can keep up to date with what's coming here at Geeky Lemon. So once more, let's thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.